Undercover boss sits near the kitchen, freezes when he overhears the waitress talking about tips. Under the gentle afternoon sunlight, Henriette, founder and owner of the Sunrise restaurant chain, stood quietly before the glass door of the very first branch. 20 years ago, he had laid the first bricks there with his own hands. From a small roadside eatery, Sunrise became the dream. He poured all his strength into building a place where every meal was not just a dish, but a source of warmth, a greeting to a new day filled with hope. Yet in recent months, though the financial reports still gleamed with positive numbers, Henry found no peace. Revenue was slowly declining like a drifting boat. Complaints from customers began to spread across forums, service quality ratings dropped, and employees were quitting in increasing numbers. The internal reports sent by the executive board were always neat and spotless, but Henry, with the instincts of a man who once stood behind the stove and mopped the floors, knew that something was being hidden behind those polished words. Without hesitation, Henry decided to do something he hadn't done for nearly a decade. Return, but not as a powerful CEO. Donning a faded jacket and an old baseball cap, he transformed himself into a stranger. A false name, a contemplative gaze. He wanted to once again feel the heartbeat of the place that had once been the very heart of his life's dream, from the perspective of an ordinary person. The door of Sunrise Diner chimed a familiar ting as he stepped inside. No one recognized the 40-year-old man as the very person who had built this empire. And it was right here, at the place where it all began, that Henry would start his journey to rekindle the fading light of his dream called Sunrise. The morning sunlight filtered through the old glass windows, casting streaks of light onto the floor tiles worn pale by the years. Henry quietly chose a table near the kitchen where he knew, if he listened carefully, he could overhear conversations no one thought to hide. Glasses clinked gently, and the coffee machine hummed steadily like the familiar breath of the cafe. He ordered a simple breakfast toast, a sunny side-up egg, and a black coffee. When the waitress brought the meal, her smile still lingered on her lips, but her eyes carried an undeniable sadness. Henry noticed her hands tremble slightly as she placed the coffee down. Only someone who had endured hard times, like he once had, could recognize how expertly exhaustion was being masked. As she turned back toward the counter, Henry happened to overhear her whisper to a nearby colleague, her voice low but filled with bitterness. "I don't even understand anymore, on my feet all day cooking and serving, but I have to hand back most of my tips. They call it a company fund, but I've never even known where that money goes." Another voice replied quietly, heavy with helplessness. "Yeah, we all know it's unfair, but who dares speak up? Say something and they'll cut your shifts. You'd be lucky just to keep your job." Henry's hand froze midair, the coffee cup trembling slightly. In that moment, the coffee tasted more bitter than ever. A wave of anger surged within him, not only because of what he had just heard, but because that harsh truth had been buried beneath the dreamlike reports he reviewed every day. A storm of questions thundered through his mind. Why hadn't anyone reported this? How could things have deteriorated to this point without his knowledge? In that very moment, Henry realized this was no longer about numbers or growth charts. This was about people, about small dreams being drained away day by day in the very place where he had once promised to be a home of bright new beginnings. And the dawn that Sunrise was supposed to bring, was it still the warm, hopeful light he had once longed for, or had it become nothing more than an empty promise to people struggling in the shadows? The midday sun slanted through the glass windows, casting pale light onto the faded Sunrise Diner, signunce a symbol of his burning entrepreneurial dreams. Henry, now clad in an old jacket, quietly returned to the diner. Not just once, but many times, at hours he had never noticed before. Early morning when the diner first opened, under the harsh midday sun, and during late afternoons when exhaustion mixed with the lingering aroma of leftover coffee in the air, and each time he returned, the carefully crafted masks painted by glossy reports began to crumble, revealing a raw, painful reality that made his heart ache. 10 a.m., a dimly lit storage room. From a hidden spot behind the shelves, Henry watched as Garethi, branch manager he once trusted, shook hands familiarly with a shady-looking supplier. A thick envelope exchanged hands quickly, and in return came sacks of cheap pancake flour, some with green mold already visible, and bottles of syrup so watered down that even light could barely give them color. Henry clenched his fists, his jaw tightened. The dishes that had built the Sunrise Brandons, his greatest pride, were now being trampled by greed and irresponsibility. At the peak of the lunch rush, the diner was packed. Plate after plate of dry, crumbling pancakes and oily, watery omelets were served, and Henry could hardly believe these were the so-called signature dishes of Sunrise. The coffee was so diluted it left nothing but a sour aftertaste. Voices of discontent echoed throughout the room. Prices keep going up, but the food keeps getting worse. Sunrise wasn't like this back in the day. By the counter, Gary merely shrugged with a smug smile before disappearing into the management office, leaving the overwhelmed staff to face the growing frustration of their customers. 3 p.m., the dim back courtyard, Henry stood motionless by the back doorway. Lynette, a young waitress, still wearing her faded apron set, huddled on the steps, holding a small piece of stale bread, taking hurried bites as if only to quiet the gnawing hunger in her stomach. Her vacant eyes were fixed on the overdue rent bill, and across the cracked screen of her old phone flashed a harsh message. Electricity shut-off notice, effective tomorrow. Moments later, she took a deep breath, quickly wiped away a tear, adjusted her apron, and walked back to the main hall. That familiar gentle smile once again lit up her face, as if no storm had just swept through her heart. Henry stood there, his chest tightening. All his life, he had dreamed of building an empire that would bring hope, a place where every day began with the warmth of a rising sun. But it was those cold, calculated policies drafted in his luxurious boardroom, his relentless pursuit of profit while forgetting the people, that had quietly pushed those like Lena into a spiral of hardship, exhaustion, and despair with no way out. He looked down at his hands. The decisions he once considered strategic now seemed to bear the imprint of silent sacrifices, the sweat and tears of countless ordinary people like Lena. The dawn that sunrise promised, when did it turn into blazing hot days without a hint of shade? And in that moment, Henry understood more clearly than ever. If he didn't start making changes right now, sunrise would soon be nothing more than a faded name on a weathered sign and an unfulfilled promise left behind forever. Henry stood still beneath the sun-bleached Sunrise Diner sign, his eyes narrowing as a soft breeze passed by, carrying with it the faint, lingering aroma of pancakes. It was a scent that once filled this entire street with lively mornings. But now, that fragrance felt lost, faint just like the fading spirit of the people working in the place that had once been his greatest pride. That day, Henry stayed late into the night. The noisy chatter of customers was long gone. Only the faint glow of yellow lights remained, and the soft sighs of those left behind, cleaning up the last shift. From the corner of the bar, Henry watched Lena quietly gather the cold coffee cups, her hands trembling from fatigue. When the last customers had gone, she collapsed onto an old chair in the corner of the kitchen. Spread across her lap were piles of overdue bills, her mother's hospital fees, her younger brother's unpaid tuition, the rent from the previous month still hanging over her head. In that moment, Henry stepped back, hiding behind a thin partition. Lena's soft voice floated out, as if she were trying to comfort herself. Just a little more, Lena. If you can just make it through this month, things will get better, right? Henry's eyes filled with tears. He remembered that exact feeling from long ago. He didn't even have a few coins in his pocket, but still forced himself to smile politely at customers. But he had risen above it. And yet, young women like Lynn, countless others just like her, were still trapped in the vicious cycle of poverty, working themselves to the bone without ever receiving what they truly deserved. That night, as the city lights flickered on, Henry quietly returned alone to his office on the top floor. Through the large glass window, he looked down at the silent diner below. His eyes settled on the faded sunrise sign, its flickering bulb barely illuminating the letters. Inside, Lena was still tidying up, her frail shoulders trembling with each gust of cold wind blowing through the back door left ajar. Unconsciously, Henry placed a hand over his heart, feeling its heavy pounding rhythm. All this time, he believed he had succeeded, that he had built an empire worthy of pride. But now he wondered, had that empire been built merely on embellished reports and the silent sacrifices of those unseen and unheard? His gaze wandered far beyond the city skyline, to the twinkling stars above, beautiful but too distant to warm those struggling on the ground below. And then a question rang out in his mind, louder and clearer than ever before. Have I built an empire, or just a gilded cage that traps small, fragile dreams? And right then, Henry knew he could no longer just stand by and watch. A true dawn had to be rekindled, not just from the sunlight outside, but from the very hearts of those still toiling away in that little kitchen. He whispered softly, as if making a promise to himself, "Tomorrow, we will begin again." Yes. Henry clenched his fist, his eyes now burning with a determination stronger than he had ever known. The sunrise he once dreamed of, it must shine bright again, no matter the cost. The next morning. That morning, the atmosphere at Sunrise Diner was heavier than ever before. Rumors of a special meeting spread like wildfire through every corner of the building. Employees whispered to each other, their faces anxious, eyes downcast with worry. Exactly at 9 a.m., the large glass doors swung open. Gone was the old faded jacket and the quiet demeanor of previous days. Henry Harrison, the legendary founder of Sunrise Diner, walked in with commanding presence, dressed sharply in a distinguished gray suit. On his chest, the silver name tag gleamed like a bell tolling to awaken every conscience in the room. Henry Harrison, CEO and founder, Sunrise Restaurant Group. The room fell into stunned silence. Gary, the branch manager, froze behind the counter, his face drained of color. Nath, small girl with calloused hands and eyes once filled with sorrow, stood, nervously clutching the hem of her faded apron, her wide eyes following Henry's every step. Henry stood in the center of the hall, his sharp gaze sweeping across every face. When he spoke, his deep, resonant voice cut through the silence like a solemn declaration. I once dreamed that Sunrise would be a place where every day began bright and hopeful for our customers, and for the silent heroes who dedicate themselves here each day. But clearly, that dawn has long been obscured, hidden behind the shadows of greed and negligence. He nodded gently as a signal. The large screen behind him lit up, and a series of raw, unfiltered clips played out for everyone to see. Gary casually accepting a thick envelope from the supplier. Crates of cheap, low-quality ingredients being wheeled into the storeroom like it was business as usual. Gary's cold voice echoed, "Make sure the internal fund is paid up. If you want the good shifts, you know what to do." And then, the final image, Lena, quietly sitting in the cold storage room, clutching a dry piece of bread, her tear-filled eyes staring at the unpaid rent notice. Her old phone screen blinked a stark message, "Power cut, off notice, effective tomorrow." A heavy wave of silence swept through the room. Heads hung low, as if every conscience in the room had just been laid bare under the harsh light of those undeniable truths. Henry turned slowly, his voice booming like thunder on a clear day. "Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign your immediate termination right here and now?" Gary stammered, his face pale as a sheet. I was only following cost-saving policies, sir." Henry cut him off sharply, his voice as cold and sharp as a blade. "Saving money is never an excuse to trample on human dignity and decency. As of this moment, you are officially fired. And for anyone else who played a part in these despicable acts, stand up and leave this room immediately." A few lower-level managers quietly bowed their heads and left the hall, their footsteps heavy with guilt, leaving behind a suffocating silence in their wake so still that even the sound of a choked-back sob could be heard. Henry walked slowly toward Lena. The whole room held its breath as he knelt slightly, his voice softening. "With everything you've endured, why did you choose to stay?" Lena's shoulders trembled slightly, but when she raised her head, her eyes shone with a light Henry had never seen before. Her voice rang out, quiet yet powerful, each word sinking deeply into every heart present. "Because I still believe that one day this place can truly be warm again, like the family breakfast we all once dreamed of." The entire room fell into a profound, resonant silence. A moment so still, it seemed deeper than any words could ever reach. Henry quietly pulled out a bank card and placed it gently into Lena's hand. "There's $50,000 in this account, enough for you to take care of your family and continue chasing those unfinished dreams. This isn't a gift. It's an investment in your resilience, your kindness, and the dignity you've held onto through even the darkest days. Are you ready to take the next step, Lena?" Lena broke down in tears, but this time, they were no longer tears of bitterness. They were tears of hope and a brand new beginning. Henry turned to face all the staff. His voice rang out with unwavering determination. "From today, Lena officially becomes a trainee in Sunrise's executive management training program. We are not just serving meals, we are serving dreams, forgotten aspirations, and working to fill each day with the light that our name, Sunrise, has always promised." Applause thundered through the hall. That morning wasn't just brightened by sunlight, it shone with the brilliance of a true new dawn, born from the very hearts of the smallest, most humble people. The clapping rose like waves crashing on the shore, but for Henry, that moment meant more than mere applause. It was a wake-up call to his own heart. Without hesitation, he walked straight to the podium, his eyes scanning every face, lingering longer on the weary, tear-filled eyes that had endured so many silent struggles. "I know, no simple promise can erase the wounds you've carried, but if today we don't rise up and start anew together, then Sunrise will be nothing more than a forgotten name on a faded sign." With a slight motion of his hand, The doors of the meeting room swung open. A team of company lawyers and HR consultants entered, carrying stacks of reform plans, hundreds of pages thick. But this wasn't a plan meant to sit on a shelf, it was a plan for immediate action. Right then and there, Henry signed off on new policies. Increased employee benefits, base salaries adjusted to meet a livable wage, healthcare support packages introduced, and scholarship programs created for children of employees facing hardships. An end to all internal funds and unofficial deductions. All tips would be transferred directly to employees by the end of each day, with full transparency and accountability. Fair promotion policies. Every employee, whether a dishwasher or a server, would have the opportunity to receive training and be fairly considered for management positions if capable. Henry didn't just talk, he acted immediately. Right there in that room, emergency support funds were announced for those in dire need, starting with Lena. And so, Lena didn't just become a trainee in the new management program. Henry personally handed her the official appointment as assistant branch manager of Sunrise Diner. That very day, under the warm glow of newly installed lights, Lena stood proudly before the team, holding the Sunrise Reborn plan in her hands. Her eyes sparkled with pride and hope. Today, we're not just reclaiming fairness, but restoring trust. From this moment on, if any of you face hardship, don't keep it to yourself. This office door will always remain open, not to display authority, but to listen to everything left unsaid. Outside the top floor window, Henry quietly gazed down. Sunrise Diner was bustling again, but what brought a genuine smile to his face wasn't the steady stream of customers. It was the sound of joyful laughter rising from the kitchen, from the coffee bar, from those quiet corners that once held only silent sorrow. The warm aroma of pancakes wafted through the air, blending with the signature scent of freshly brewed coffee and aroma Henry had once poured his heart and soul into perfecting. Below, Lena was now guiding the new staff. But this time, there were no more fearful, eyes-only excitement and a burning desire to begin a beautiful new journey. A gentle breeze swept through. Henry softly closed his eyes and whispered, as if engraving a vow deep into his heart, "This is the dawn I once dreamed of." And for him, it wasn't just a private promise. It was the true beginning of a sunrise that would never fade. That very morning, Sunrise Diner seemed to wear a brand new look. But it wasn't because of gleaming new signs or freshly painted walls. It was a revival that came from deep within, from eyes now sparkling with hope, from smiles no longer forced, and from hands clasped tightly together in a spirit of unity. Right in the main hall, before a crowd of employees and loyal customers, Peter Harrison solemnly announced the new reform policy, Sunrise Reborn. From this day forward, Sunrise isn't just the place where mornings begin, it will be the birthplace of lives renewed. He raised the reform plan high above his head, his voice warm yet unwavering. Comprehensive employee benefits, a livable wage, expanded healthcare coverage, scholarships for employees' children, and fully paid vacation days. Absolute transparency in tips and employee rights. All tips to be openly recorded and delivered directly to deserving employees. No more vague internal funds. No more unreasonable deductions. Rebuilding Sunrise's culture based on 3 core values: respect, kindness, integrity, because only when people are truly valued can Sunrise shine as it was meant to. The entire hall erupted in applause. In the front row, Lenith, once fragile, quiet girl, now stood tall in her brand new uniform. On her chest, her name tag gleamed under the bright lights. Lena Collins, Assistant General Manager. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she stood before the new team of employees, her lips forming a radiant smile. "I used to believe that if I just endured it, everything would eventually pass. But today, I understand this. Only when we dare to speak up, dare to seize opportunities, can the light shine its way back to us. And it is you who will continue to keep that light burning for Sunrise." Thunderous applause erupted, not just from the employees, but also from longtime customers who had stood by Sunrise through its many ups and downs. On the top floor, Peter stood silently by the large window, hands in his pockets, his eyes calm and distant as he looked down at the lively scene below. Laughter and joyful chatter filled the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of pancakes wafting throughout the space, reminding him of the early days of his journey, filled with dreams and endless aspirations. He smiled faintly, his eyelids gently closing, as the soft morning sunlight brushed across his shoulders. In that moment, a whisper seemed to rise straight from his heart. This is the dawn I once dreamed of." Peter leaned slightly against the cool glass, letting the early morning breeze sweep through his hair, now streaked with silver. Below, Sunrise Diner bustled like a melody greeting the new day. Familiar sounds rang out the clatter of kitchenware, orders being called with cheerful voices, and above all, the joyful conversations that had long been absent from this place. His gaze settled on the service counter. Lina, now a true leader, stood confidently in her light-colored suit, eyes bright, her stance strong and steady. She gently guided new employees, adjusting the collar of a newly hired young girl. A warm smile bloomed on Lena's fascia, kind of radiance that even Peter had to admit shone like the very sunrise he had always longed for. A little further off, near the window seats, a young family gathered around breakfast. A boy, no older than 4 or 5, excitedly cut into a pancake shaped like the sun, his chubby cheeks lifted in a wide grin that made his mother laugh out loud. The father gently clasped his wife's hand, their eyes meeting with the quiet, complete joy of a simple, perfect moment. Across the room, in a cozy corner, an elderly couple long-time loyal patron sat, quietly sipping their hot coffee. Their faint smiles exchanged without words, as if they too felt the subtle but undeniable change stirring in the air. Happiness had never truly left this place. It had simply been buried under the dust of days that forgot what mattered most. Peter reached out, his fingers resting against the glass, his eyes gently closing once again. In his heart, he could almost hear his own youthful voice from years ago, the day he first stood beneath the Sunrise Diner sign, hands still scented with butter and sugar, his heart swelling with pride to offer the world a true dawn. And now, after all the storms and mistakes, that dawn had finally returned. He opened his eyes, his voice soft but heavy with emotion, rising like a vow etched deep into his soul. This is the dawn I once dreamed of. You can build a mighty empire, own skyscrapers that pierce the sky, but if you forget the value of humanity, it's all just a castle built on sand. A truly enduring business isn't built on glittering spreadsheets and soaring numbers, but on hearts that have been warmed, dreams that were once extinguished and now rekindled, and people who have found themselves again because of you. Because in the end, success isn't measured by profit, but by how many people found hope and happiness, simply because you paused, listened, and chose kindness.